Good morning. Today is Thursday, May 21st, and I'm Pastor Terry with Tuscola United Methodist Church. Thank you so much for joining us on our daily devotional. This week and next week, we are taking some time to look through the 10 Commandments, and without further ado, I'm going to jump right in because today's one of the good ones. They're all good, but today is one of those I particularly am anxious to talk about. And that is the fourth commandment, which is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So this comes to us from Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son, or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your town. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Now, like the past couple ones we've discussed, there's actually there's a little more depth to this one. When asked why we keep the Sabbath, we're told because God kept the Sabbath, and aren't we supposed to do everything that God did? And there's many reasons for keeping the Sabbath that I'll talk about briefly, but there's one big reason that I'm going to get to in a minute. One is that people are designed to need rest. We are designed to need rest. And I'll tell you something, in the world today, the way that it is, I think we need rest even more because you are never away from your phone. You're never away from email. You're never away from text. And that doesn't mean that things aren't important, that do need to come through. I will always be glad that I have my phone with me if one of you goes in the hospital because I want to know immediately. I don't care if I'm in the movie theater. I want to know so that I can get there to be with you and to see you. But human beings are designed to need to take a break sometimes. We are designed to rest our bodies, to rest our souls, to rest our spirit. And God knew this, and God knew that it was best for us to take this rest. But there is a bigger reason, I believe, for the Sabbath than this. And we're going to look at some stories in the Bible to kind of illustrate this. And that is, I believe the Sabbath is all about trusting God. Now, why would the Sabbath be about trusting God? Well, let me explain. The first time that we really start talking about the Sabbath is in the book of Exodus. And the people of Israelite are wandering in the desert. Well, at this point, they're camped at Mount Sinai, but they're hungry. They have no food. They have no water. And so God provides them with manna. And so they're told, go out every day in the morning and collect enough manna for that day. But if you try to collect too much manna, if you try to hoard, I'm talking to you toilet paper hoarders, if you try to hoard, that manna will rot and spoil by the next day, and so you won't have it. So the Israelites learned very quickly, only bother to gather enough for the day at hand. However, on the day before the Sabbath, on that day, they were able to collect twice as much manna, one for their Friday and one for their Sabbath day, which is, as we know, the Jewish Sabbath is Saturday. So what an amazing thing to be able to do. You have to trust that God is going to provide this manna. You have to trust that I don't need to hoard this manna, but you have to trust that I can collect enough, that it's not going to rot, and that God is going to make sure that I am fed and provided for during my Sabbath. Now, in today's world, we don't have the same situation. My refrigerator is full of food, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sabbath, or Sunday. That doesn't impact things in the way it is, but let me tell you what it does impact. How many people, if they could work every day to try to get as much as they possibly could, would work every single day? we are having to trust God. We have to trust God that me working only up through 6 days, and that work may be cleaning the house on your Saturday or whatever your day off is, uh, whatever that work is, you have to trust God that it's okay to take a break on our Sabbath, which is Sunday. We have to trust that God is with us. Can we trust God? Do we have enough faith that God will take care of us, even if we never work on the Sabbath? So, why do I truly believe this? Well, the first reason is because of the manna, but the second reason is God Himself came down and taught us these lessons in the form of Jesus Christ. So, I want to read to you from the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verses 1 through 14. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him or his companions to eat, but only for the priests. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and yet are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, 'I desire mercy and not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." He left that place and entered their synagogue. A man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, "Is it lawful to cure on the Sabbath?" so that they might accuse him. He said to them, "Suppose one of you has only one sheep, and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath. Will you not lay hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a human being than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and it was restored as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. So Jesus gives the Pharisees a great big lesson on what is the true meaning of Sabbath. So first of all, understand that his disciples did not work typical schedules. So they weren't bringing money in. So as they were walking, they were simply plucking heads of grain and eating them. And Jesus reminds them, David went in. It basically would be the equivalent of people coming in and eating the communion bread and drinking the communion juice off the altar. A lot of us would just be aghast. But if they were starving, then God would want them to eat. God, I believe this from this scripture. God would want them to eat. And again, Jesus heals a man on the Sabbath, saying, if you had a sheep, wouldn't you rescue that one sheep? And this isn't the only time that Jesus does something on the Sabbath. He does these same two stories are also both in Mark, where Jesus' disciples pick the grain and Jesus heals a man with a shriveled hand. Luke 13, Jesus restores a woman with a disabling spirit, which suggests that the Sabbath is a day of freedom. In Luke 14, Jesus heals a man suffering from what we think is dropsy, which suggests that the Sabbath is a day for mercy. Now, Jesus did not hesitate to peel away some of the situations that were weighing down the Sabbath. If you had a chance to do the Bible study that we did on the Apocrypha, great study, just one of the best studies we've done in a long time. One of the things we learned is that the Pharisees were so terrified of displeasing God that they wanted to follow every letter of the law exactly, because they had been through a whole lot in the past couple of 100 years, and they believed it was from not following God's law, to the point where if they grew herbs on their windowsill, they would actually count out the herbs, and every 10th stalk they would pluck off and give to the temple as an offering, so as not to cheat God out of a tithe. But what Jesus is saying is you're getting too caught up in the definitions. Sometimes we have to look at the big picture, and the Sabbath is not a day of rest if that means that we allow bad things to happen to people. The Sabbath instead is a day for doing good, not just for doing ritual duty. So the Gospels show us that Jesus never violated the fourth commandment. And we have to decide for ourselves, what does resting on the Sabbath mean? Do we trust God enough to not do work on the Sabbath? And if you do, you might work for a church like I do, which apparently even in the Old Testament was allowed for the priests. But what it comes down to is, do you trust God? And do you believe that you can do good on the Sabbath? I hope you've enjoyed today's scripture and lesson, and tomorrow we will look at the fifth commandment. I will see you then. Have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye-bye.